Act 4, Scene 1 is much shorter, so this video also will be much shorter. It opens with Claudius and Gertrude in conversation. We know that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are on stage at the start and then immediately dismissed. So we are reminded of the fact that those are characters which are allied with Claudius and thus betrayers of Hamlet. Claudius refers to these sighs, these profound heaves. We kind of open in media res in this scene, and we have to assume that Gertrude has been, acting upset with Claudius. Again, we've got those dialectic words, these sighs, these profound heaves, which demonstrate that the kinetics of the scene, the body language, must be quite upset. At this point, Gertrude asks for them to be alone, so Rosencrantz and Guildenstern leave, and when they do, Gertrude describes Hamlet as mad as the sea and wind, when both contend which is the mightier. And what I find particularly interesting about that imagery is that the wild nature is very much it's in conflict with each other. So we've got two acts of nature in conflict with each other, which I think represents the inner conflict of Hamlet. We talked about soliloquies essentially being Hamlet in dialogue with himself, in conflict with himself, arguing with himself, and that's apparent in this imagery. So I think she's been quite, what's the word? I think she's hit the nail on the head. I think she's been quite precise in her inference there. But then she says that he kills Polonius in, quote, brainish apprehension. And with that noun phrase, we kind of have a bit of ambiguity. Is Gertrude lying on behalf of Hamlet and saying that he is mad because she's promised him she's not going to tell Claudius that it's craft, that it's an act? Or does she, irrespective of what Hamlet said, think he is mad? Is this genuinely her opinion? So there's some ambiguity there that the actress would have to make a determination upon, of the director. And she describes Polonius here as the unseen good old man. But just the fact that that noun has so many pre-modifiers on it are quite interesting. I don't think they all have equal value. Yes, he is old, but good and unseen, those two adjectives kind of contradict each other a bit. The fact that he is willing to hide and spy on Hamlet, that's not the act of a good person, is it? So I think that those two pre-modifiers, unseen and good, kind of get to the point of Polonius's behaviour. There are elements of him which are sweet, and there are elements of him that are moral, and there are elements of that character which are loyal, but they are measured and they are balanced against the parts of him which are distinctly questionable, acts of betrayal, evidence of pomposity. So Polonius is he's a character who I feel divided about, and that's very much kind of exemplified by the fact that different performances of Polonius portray him in really juxtaposing manners. Claudius's exclamative at discovering that Polonius has been killed is short. Oh, heavy indeed. And then he immediately starts thinking about himself. It had been so with us had we been there. So whilst he does acknowledge Polonius's death, his first real thought is the danger to his own body, the danger to his own self. And then, having seen that he accidentally made this slip, this kind of selfish interpretation, he says, oh, his liberty is full of threats to all, to you yourself, to us, to everyone. So you can see he kind of backtracks on his selfish interpretation of Hamlet's act and pretends he's thinking more about Denmark, about Gertrude, but his first impulse is to defend himself. And then you can see here I've highlighted in red font the rhetorical question, how shall this bloody deed be answered? What's going to be the consequence of this action? It will be laid to us. It will be laid at their door. It's something that they may be blamed for, whose providence should have kept short, restrained, and out of haunt this mad young man. So the reason why people may blame Claudius is that it's his job to spot somebody who is behaving irrationally and, you know, keep them in a place which is safe and undangerous to others. So Claudius is thinking about his reputation here. He's thinking about his kingness and how he is viewed, and his shortcomings as a king. So we can see that he's concerned with the consequences of Hamlet's actions. But Gertrude then wishes Claudius to see something about Hamlet. She says, "To draw apart the body he hath killed," that's where Hamlet's gone, "o'er whom his very madness, like some ore among a mineral of metals base, shows itself pure, he weeps for what he has done." So she's trying to point out that in Hamlet, in amongst the base elements of his nature, there is some kind of ore, some kind of precious stone which shines, which is pure, which shows itself in the way that he cries for Polonius. So through that simile, Gertrude is trying to persuade Claudius that there is some good still in Hamlet, some good still in her son. There is a love there between Gertrude and her son. Whatever she has done, there is love for her son. But Claudius does not want to consider that. "Come away. Sooner shall the mountains touch, but we will ship him hence." So his way of comforting Gertrude is to say that he's going to get rid of Hamlet as soon as possible. And it's clear here that to Gertrude, he is telling her that he's moving Hamlet to England. There is nothing being shared with Gertrude regarding his true plans, which are to cost Hamlet his life. That's the plan. So we can see that he's kind of protecting Gertrude from the truth of his actions, and that act of deception is perhaps a kindness of a husband to a wife, perhaps it is Machiavellianism because it is deception also. He says, "We must with all our majesty and skill both countenance and excuse this vile deed," this act of Hamlet's to kill Polonius. So they've got to excuse this behaviour, they've got to face it. It will cause them political problems, and that's what Claudius wants Gertrude to see as the reason, the determining factor for Hamlet's removal from court. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are then called for, they re-enter, and Claudius terms them friends both, and in doing so demonstrates the betrayal that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern represents, because they are supposed to be Hamlet's friends since childhood, and yet they are friends first to Claudius. They're sent away to go and find Hamlet, help him with the body of Polonius, go and put it somewhere safe in the chapel, which is an appropriate place as opposed to hiding it in the neighbouring room. So he's trying to kind of cover Hamlet's behaviour. And then he says to Gertrude, "Come, Gertrude, we'll call up our wisest friends and let them know both what we mean to do and what's untimely done. So envious slander, whose whisper o'er the world's diameter, as level as the cannon to his blank transports its poisoned shot, may miss our name and hit the woundless air." So the plan is to spread the true to spread the most appropriate version of the story of what's happened, because the concern is that there will otherwise be rumour abroad which is twisted towards some envious ends. And the most obvious person who would wish to use Claudius's mismanagement of his crown and his country is young Norway, so Fortinbras. So we've just got to keep that in the back of our minds right from the very opening of the play, that young Fortinbras has stood out against Denmark, and so if envious slander can whisper o'er the world's diameter to get to him, he may be able to utilise that rumour and weaponise it against Claudius to perhaps, regain his lost lands. But Claudius wants to use his statecraft, use the strategies which seem to be derived from Polonius here to spread the word about give his own whisper, I suppose, as to what's happened, so that gossip, which is quite slanderous, so a cruel interpretation of what's happened, can't hit him and instead will hit the woundless heir. So Claudius is very much concerned about threats to his own person, and as an extension to that, threats to his power, threats to Denmark, very much self first in this scene. So yes, we've got the inevitable sending away of Hamlet coming up in the scenes that follow.